Hi, I'm Alex Howard, and welcome to the show. My guest today is Timber Hawkeye, author of Buddhist Boot Camp. Hi, Timber. And in today's interview, we're going to be talking about engaging with the flow. And really what we mean by that is, how do you attune yourself to the flow of life in a way where you're also showing up and playing your part in that process? So maybe, Timber, a good starting point is, when we talk about there being a flow to life, something that people can align themselves with, attune to, what do we mean by that? And also, how's that shown up in your life?
I think there's a natural progression to things, and we often either try to rush them or slow them down, and life goes at its own pace. We actually can't control either, but what we can do is adjust ourselves to be with the flow. And we'll notice that in times when we cling to something that's long gone, or when we are so focused on the future, we're missing what's going on right now. And so the idea of staying present, and I always visualize a stream with a leaf, and the leaf just kind of goes through with the flow. And then there's those of us who are on the side, just keep trying to cling to the side of the river, and those that are just in the middle going with it and letting that which happens happen, and enjoying every moment, and being an active participant and navigating through it, because we don't have to be flailing about in the water and going crazy. Like, it just relax and let it go. But at the same time, realize that it takes two. You're engaged with it. You can steer towards one flow or the other, and you can go into waters that don't flow as fast. But it's really figuring out first what kind of life you want to have, and then you have a reference point. Because if you don't, you're subject to what the universe is doing, as opposed to working with it.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and one of the reasons why I was particularly excited to have this dialogue with you was I've kind of seen both this kind of process of just trusting and just going with, and this place of engaging. I give a couple of examples. Part of how our contact came about was I contacted you about doing this interview, and then as part of that I said, and if you need accommodation while you're in London, you're really welcome to come and stay. And then it transpired that really for this whole tour that you've been doing around the UK, you've just been staying with total strangers, people that have contacted you via Facebook and said, hey, I've got a sofa or whatever, you can come and sleep at my house. So it's like a huge just trusting.
Of course, yeah. I have no reason not to. And this is how I did it across the U.S. too. The book tour there was 3 months long, and I stayed with, people who opened up their homes. And that started years ago through a website called couchsurfing.org, where people, the idea behind it is every one of us has a couch in our homes that sits alone in the dark every night. And it can be...
and it longs for company.
Yes, it can be someone's bed who is traveling the globe on a low budget. And the book tour is definitely all sponsored by fans of the book. And so when someone says, hey, I have a couch or a floor space for you to sleep on, I had to make sure that if I do this book tour, that it's in line with my values. Yeah. So for me to stay in a hotel or to show up at a book talk in a limo would lose any and all integrity behind me just talking a talk instead of walking the walk. And I have complete and total trust in the goodness of others, because I see it every day. It's when we tend to believe that what's in the news is reality, and all that's in the news is the negativity and all the bad things that can happen, that we can then habitually somehow end up living in the worst case scenario mode. And I just can't, it's never happened. I can't imagine that happening.
Yeah, and in a little bit I want to come to the other side of the coin, as it were, in terms of how we engage with that process. But before we do that, you've told me over the last week or so some different stories of some beautiful synergies and unfoldments that have happened. And one particular one I think would be good to share was the guy that drove with you across America. Can you share that story? I think it's a great example of just opening up to the flow of something.
Yeah, I was giving a book talk in California, and I still had the majority of my tour ahead of me, and I had to drive all the way to New York and back, and someone who attended the event was just there to, like every 100 other people, and we ended up chatting afterwards, and he's an American Sign Language interpreter, which is something I've always been interested in, and he teaches yoga. And I had one friend who joined me for a couple of stops along the coast in California, and she was going to leave the next day. And as a joke, after the event, I said, she's leaving. She's going to take the train back up north. There's going to be an empty seat next to me. And I said, do you want to join me for the trip? And he said, sure, why not? And it was just one of those spontaneous things. And he ended up flying to New York and then driving across the country with me, which was an incredible journey for both of us. Because you can imagine the people that you meet and the talks and the different parts of the country. And it was just really, why not? There's an empty seat next to me. It would be really wonderful to meet someone on the path. And we've both significantly impacted each other's lives in that. And very briefly, I'll mention that it took nothing more than a driver across the country with me to convince him to sell everything he owns and move to Hawaii.
a familiar story in your life.
And he has done that, and he's very happy. And I've also reached out to start studying American Sign Language, and it's been an incredible journey. And it started in that moment of trusting that gut feeling that says, invite him to join you. And that's what started it. And he said, sure. And he trusted me to say, okay, I'll go with this total random stranger. And a stranger is just a friend you haven't met yet. Yeah. And I think there's way more good people in the world than those who are so hurt that they're causing hurt to others.
Yes. And wasn't there also a beautiful synergy at the end of that piece where one of his former teachers ended up...
Yeah, so when I started going to college and taking American Sign Language, it turns out that my teacher was his teacher back in 1999. And when he moved to Hawaii and we reconnected, it turns out he's living in my old neighborhood. So it was this really weird thing of how that happened. And the odds of that are 1 in I don't know how many million. But
well, of course, I'll mention we had lunch last week with your publisher, and it turned out that one of the girls working there had rented the same apartment that I'd rented in Highgate in North London, and she'd moved in after I'd moved out. I mean, you think the millions of homes. It's just totally extraordinary.
It's a very small world we live in. Yeah.
So on one hand, we've got this place of opening to the flow and trusting life to unfold. But I said a little bit earlier that I see you've really embraced the two elements of this in a sense, that there's also the place that we actively engage with that. And I've become really aware of how much determination and commitment it's taken on your part to develop this book, to write it. I know that you wrote to and contacted over 700 bookstores in the UK. Say something about that, the place of, I don't know if you'd call it determination or commitment or what you'd call it, but the place that active engagement plays in the process.
Yeah, we can't just sit at home with our feet up on the couch and say, God will take care of everything. It's about us being active participants in the outcome that we want to see, or in the flow of it. Not so much outcome focused, but just in the flow. And it's trusting. It's inviting people to come on the cross country drive with you. And yes, I wrote the book, but that's great. But when people say it's helpful and it would be really good if it ended up in more people's hands, it's up to somebody to go out there and reach out to the bookstores to make it happen. And that somebody is me. And so I would call and I would invite them. And it's that story about the guy who's drowning, and some boat comes by and says, do you want help? And he says, no, God will take care of me. And then another big ship comes by and sends him a life jacket. And he goes, no, God will take care of me. And then a helicopter comes by and wants to rescue him. And he said, God will take care of me. And then he ends up drowning. And he's like, God, where were you? And God's like, well, I sent you a boat, I sent you a ship, I sent you a helicopter. So we definitely have to be active participants in it. We can't be passive about anything in life. And so for me, it's about looking within and going, okay, if it's a love-based thought and not a fear-based thought, go with it. Everything will work out. If it's a fear-based thought, look into that, go, what is that about? And let go of the fear and just go right into love-based decisions. And that's whether or not to sleep on someone's couch or not to sleep on someone's couch. It's just letting go of fear has been the most, because it is the most debilitating obstacle for us. And so conversely, letting go of it is the most liberating thing.
Yeah, but sometimes that actively engaging, it's challenging. I remember back to the first interview we filmed around your journey with Buddhist Boot Camp and how you stepped away from corporate life and you spent time in monastic life and then coming back into the world. And I think what's often challenging for people is they move away from having lots of noise and pressures and having to kind of really heavily engage in worldly life, and they may move to a space or a chapter of their life where they find a place of quietness and connectedness and spaciousness, and moving from that to then having to re-find a way to have discipline and to commit and to follow through on something. It's often difficult to find that in a way that doesn't feel like a regression back to the kind of unhealthy way of doing that, and to have that place of healthily engaging. And I'm wondering what you think supports that, or how you see that.
Well, if I understand correctly, it's stepping back and looking at the big picture and realizing that what we may sometimes choose, the quote-unquote easier path, will actually get us farther from where we want to be than closer to it. And so, we look at an uphill climb toward happiness and go, well, that looks really hard. I'm not going to do it, even though that's a climb toward euphoria. But an easy route will take us farther from it. And in the long run, living a life that we know will never actually get us to happiness is significantly more difficult than that uphill climb would have been. And we don't trust that when we climb there, there's going to be help along the way. We're not going to be alone. And the views are incredible.
Right. And what I think I'm hearing you say is it's not that having to work for something or strive for something, that there's anything fundamentally wrong with that. It's what's motivating or what's driving that. Why are we trying to get somewhere?
And the intention is really, really important. I think because intention can be fear-based or it can be love-based. And I think when it's love-based, if our intention is to be good, to do good, it doesn't mean we always will, because our definition of helping can be different than what someone will define it as. But if our intention is to live a peaceful, wonderful, calm life, then we will live exactly that.
Yes.
But when our intention is to avoid risk, is to constantly duck and dive out of the dangers in life, then that's energy flows where attention goes.
Yes.
And so if our attention is on the negative, we're going to bring exactly that experience into our lives. It's like, I believe Neil Donald Walsh was saying, if you pray, if your prayer is, I want more money, you will have exactly that, the wanting of more money, because that's what you're focused on. If you're going to the store and saying, don't forget the milk, don't forget the milk, don't forget the milk, you're going to come home with everything but the milk because you're focused on forgetting the milk. And so I think the intention is what drives our dedication, our self-control, our determination. And those things are key. They're the fuel. Otherwise, you just have a vehicle and it's not going anywhere. And you're like, oh, I'll just end up where I end up.
Yes.
We've all been given the tools with which to navigate through life. And I'm definitely telling you, even making the book accessible to others, it's not about just, putting in neutral and saying it'll go where it needs to go. It's reaching out. It's making the phone calls. It's sending out the letters. It's calling people. It's engaging. It's inviting people to. When you're done reading it, don't keep it on the shelf somewhere. Give it to somebody else. Keep it flowing.
I mean, I remember you said to me when the book first came out, and I think it was when it was the self-published version that came out, you were living in Hawaii, and you were calling bookstores in New York. It was like, was it
it's
3 in the...
It's a 6-hour difference. Right. Yeah, so it'd be like 2 o'clock in the morning. I would lock myself in the bathroom just to not disturb my roommate. And I would be making phone calls to New York, because that's 8 o'clock in the morning there, and I still had to go to work at 7 a.m. my time, which by the time I come back from work, their offices are already closed.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting, and I've met some incredible people that way. Absolutely. I've also met some people who said they don't have, I don't have time for this. I don't have time, and that's fine. That's just where they are. I've contacted some bookstores that are operating from a place of fear because not enough people are supporting independent bookstores, and they reach out to Amazon as a knee-jerk reaction.
Sure.
And I'm grateful for Amazon. They're making the book available in places where there aren't any bookstores.
Yes.
But if there is one locally, my intention and my hope in visiting so many independent bookstores is to bring people from the community back into this incredible, magical place where wonderful things can happen.
Yeah, and yet what's so interesting as a kind of observer of it is to see how, on one hand, your Facebook posts, how remarkably viral it's gone, with hundreds of thousands of people now following. And so there is a place where something has a natural evolution, unfoldment, aliveness, which is just happening. And there's a place where real discipline, determination, hard work also meets that.
So it's happening organically, the message is spreading, but it also requires my dedication to post regularly and, keep people engaged, keep people on their toes, invite people to look within, to comment back. And so, yes, it's equal. I can't just create the page and say people will come. I have to find out what is it you're here for.
Yes.
And give them exactly what it is they want, and on a regular basis, so there's a continuity there. And I'm grateful for Facebook, to be honest, because they've built in a mechanism through which I can pre-schedule posts. So I don't have to physically be there, because yes, I'm in school and I have a life.
Yes.
But I also am so deeply committed to enriching the life experience of others.
Yes.
That I can find a balance within all. And so I get enough sleep, but I also get enough information out there for people to share.
Yeah, and it really, my sense is that what drives your commitment to it is this contact with a purpose, a passion, something that you deeply believe in.
Absolutely.
And I'm wondering also how that connection to that is also a fuel that supports that. That there's a place where, I guess my question is, does it feel like there are times where on one hand there's a huge effort that's going on, and on the other hand it's effortless because there's something which is supporting it?
Well, it's when you enjoy doing what you're doing, then it's not work. You're still busy a lot of the time, but it doesn't feel like work. It's so rewarding in so many ways that you just want to do more. You want to just keep doing more.
Yes.
And sometimes I want to do more than I even have the energy to do. And that's, again, where friends come in and say, take it easy.
Sure.
It's when the Buddha was asked, how can you be taking a nap when so many people need your help? And he said, well, I can't help anyone if I don't get my nap. And that's really important to remember, because, again, even something that could be perceived as selfish, if the intention behind the nap is to have enough energy with which to help others, then even the nap is a selfless act.
And it also seems to me it's walking the talk. In a sense, it's like if you were constantly burning yourself out in service of others, there's something dysfunctional about that.
Yeah, I can't talk about being at peace with the world when I'm a mess. Yeah, it contradicts the message, which then loses all integrity, which then loses fuel, and it all falls apart. But as long as my message, my work, my life, everything is in line with my values, everything works out. And that's why I invite others. Find out what their values are, live according to them, work according to them, purchase according to them, vote according to them, and everything will fall into place. It won't feel like a fight.
Yeah, that was something that I really liked in the book. You talked about how, and these aren't quite the words, but the way I interpreted it is basically we vote with our wallets, in a sense.
We vote every single day. We decide which companies get to stay in business and which do not. And the invitation is to look at how is it that we are doing this? Someone may be against animal cruelty, for example, but the toothpaste they're using or their hair products may actually be used by a company that uses the same practices that we are against, and yet we're supporting it with our purchase. So the invitation is to do the research and find out which companies actually are in line with my values and support them, even if it costs 50 pennies more,
Sure.
in the long run, we can't afford not to. Because then we show up at the store and we're very upset that our favorite product is gone, but it's because we haven't been purchasing it. And we are voting with our feet. I heard here in the UK when people had an issue with Starbucks coming in under certain practices,
Right.
what they did, they just said, we're not going to go there.
Yeah, it was very powerful.
And it was very powerful,
Yeah.
and Starbucks apparently cleaned up their act, and now they're welcome here.
Yeah.
And
They started paying some tax as a result. That's
Yeah,
basically
the
over
concept,
they weren't
right?
paying any corporation tax. That's basically
Yeah.
the deal. Yeah.
And that's just one example. In the
Yeah.
book, I use Hawaii as a great example because it's a little island, and a lot of the stuff there has to be brought in from the outside. And they would ship in mangoes, which makes no sense because they grow on the island. But we can't look at the store and blame them for doing it, because if we stop buying those mangoes that are brought on from the outside and start buying the local ones, the store will then stop ordering them from the outside and go local. We're the ones in control, even if we don't feel like it.
Yeah, that's great. We're pretty much out of time, but I've got one very short question for you, which I'm aware could be a whole interview in of itself. But we talk about finding being aligned with purpose. And
Yeah.
can you just say something brief about what supports someone finding that? We've only got about 30, 40 seconds, so I'm giving you much time. But
Wow. When we have a purpose in life, then we have a reason to get up in the morning, which is the greatest gift we can give ourselves.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. So great. Well, look, thank you, Timber,
Thank you.
for your time. And thank you for watching. You can find out more about Timber and his book, Buddhist Boot Camp, at www.buddhistbootcamp.com. Thank you for watching.